Ugior 2024 nauior aallartippoq isiginnaarluarisi.
That is the equivalent of the Dick Clark Rockin' Eve of Greenland. Much in the news, and we'll talk about Greenland today, but we wanted to share with you that bit of video as we await Don Jr.'s dispatches from Greenland, where he's either is now or is headed. But we'll talk about Greenland. Good morning. Welcome to the morning meeting. Exclusive coverage of Greenland. You won't get that anywhere else. Thank you for joining. Dan, Sean, and I are here to take you through the day. Lots going on in the day book, which I'll run through in a moment, as always, with peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace towards all. Gentlemen, have you ever been to Greenland? And if not, why not? Dan?
No, I have not. I would like to go to Iceland, which is in the neighborhood, but I have not been to Greenland.
Yeah. Dan, Sean, you ever been to Greenland?
No, but I have been to every continent.
Ooh.
Really? How many continents do you think there are?
Off the top of my head, I'm going to say 7.
7. So you've been to the North Pole and the South Pole?
I've been to Antarctica. I don't think the North Pole is technically a continent.
Okay. We'll outsource that one too. Remember, I'm still waiting for somebody to tell me how many times Kamala Harris had no public schedule during the campaign. Thank you for joining. If you'd like to be part of the conversation here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. If you're watching on YouTube or on X and you want to know how to be part of the conversation here on the two-way platform, here's a pro tip. Go to twoway.tv, and sign up, and you can receive a notification every day with links to be able to join the program through the two-way platform. Thank you for joining. All right, I'll run through the day book, and then we'll kick around some issues and take your questions and comments. President of the United States wakes up in California, and at 5:15 Eastern Time, he's delivering remarks in thermal California, I think that's how it's pronounced, about the environment and conservation. And then he goes back to Los Angeles. So he'll spend the day in California with that one public event. The vice president, a bit of a twist. The first part of her schedule says that she'll be in Washington, D.C., where she will receive briefings and conduct internal meetings with staff. These meetings will be closed press. But then she's participating at 4:30 in the lying of state ceremony for former President Carter, whose body comes to Washington today. And she'll be doing a eulogy and laying a wreath. Her husband will be there too. Maybe the biggest event of the day, at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, Donald Trump holds a press conference at Mar-a-Lago. Not sure if he'll actually take questions, but he'll be talking to the public through the media who are there. I do think he's going to take questions.
I was going to say, there's no way he's not taking
questions. It could be what we like to call a wide-ranging press conference, and I'll be curious to see if Greenland comes up. I bet it does. So we'll watch for that. Don't know where J.D. Vance is today. He was in Washington yesterday, as you saw from the video. As I said, President Carter's remains come to Washington, 2:15 Eastern Time. They arrive at Joint Base Andrews. They go to the U.S. Navy Memorial in downtown D.C. Then a horse-drawn caisson carries Carter's remains to the U.S. Capitol, where his casket will be carried into the rotunda, put on the same platform that Lincoln's body was put on. If you are a president, before you die, you get a menu of options, of things you can have as part of your funeral, as part of your memorial service. Carter appears to have chosen the whole menu. As far as I can tell so far, he's doing pretty much everything available to former presidents. And so at 4:30, there'll be the ceremony. Not just the vice president, but Speaker Johnson and Senate Leader Thune are all expected to deliver eulogies and lay wreaths. And then at 7 o'clock through midnight, the public can file through the rotunda and pay their respects to former President Carter. Speaker Johnson at 10 o'clock is having his weekly press conference. At 11, the House will begin to vote, including on the Laken-Riley Act, which makes it easier for law enforcement to deal with people who are in the country legally. Today in New York, there's a court hearing, I think it's the arraignment, but it's some sort of court proceeding for the man accused of burning the woman alive on the subway, killing her on the subway. So the issue of immigration will be front and center both in Washington and here in Gotham City. And there's other things going on in the Hill today. The scheduling of various confirmation hearings is starting to trickle out. We should have 3 or 4 confirmation hearings that begin this next week. All right, Let's start with the Trump press conference. Sean, you expect questions. What else do you expect to be asked and answered? What news do you expect to come out of it? Just what's your general sense?
If I get this right, I'm going to go play Powerball and Mega Millions today. Look, I think he's going to get asked a lot about the reconciliation bill. He'll be asked about his nominees. So there's no question he's going to take questions. I wouldn't be surprised if you get a couple questions on China and TikTok. Anyway, I think that's obviously there's going to be a wide-ranging amount of questions. So what the news will be really interesting because, until it gets asked, you don't know. But I have a feeling that you're going to hear him talk a lot about day one things as well, things he's going to undo from Biden. Biden did this executive order banning drilling. Trump will obviously note that he's going to undo some of those things. You might hear a little bit about the nominees as well.
All right, Sean, as long as we're in the predicting game, from the first syllable to the last, how long will the whole thing be? Well, and we'll clip this and we'll show it tomorrow.
49 minutes.
49 minutes. Okay, Dan, over, under. Sean set the mark. Over, under, 49 minutes.
Over.
Over. Okay, and Dan, what do you expect out of this?
I think he's going to try to get ahead of the Jack Smith. Will he or will he not release this report that apparently Trump's lawyers are arguing should not be released? I think to Sean's point, he's going to try to get ahead of or talk about what Joe Biden is doing and that he'll undo it and start setting expectations for day one. And I imagine he will have a nugget that he hopes will be in the headline for something he will do on day one.
All right, one last prediction to make. You're going to answer for 3 networks, and the answers are whole, part, or none. Will they cover the press conference live? Ready? Whole, part, or none. Dan, Fox.
Whole.
Sean.
Whole.
Dan, MSNBC.
Slow news day. Whole.
Sean.
Part.
Part. Dan, CNN.
Whole. They all want to make nice.
Sean.
Oh, I actually will default. I think whole, but for Dan's initial answer, slow news day. Not because I want to make nice.
All right. Paul is noting all these answers, and we'll play them
can I make one other thing? I wouldn't be surprised if CNN carries it whole but annotates it. You're going to get like the person that comes in and says that was a falsehood. He exaggerated. I mean, they can't help themselves.
Yeah. Will anyone fact check it live?
Yeah. Yes, someone will. All right. Sean, I'll start with you again on this, just because you know Trump the best of all of us. What is he doing with Greenland? What is this actually about?
It's a great question, Mark. Here's the thing. I had Eric Prince on my podcast last week, and Eric was telling me that they actually were a lot closer to striking a deal with Greenland in the first term than any of us ever knew. I was not aware of that. But look, they believe strategically that this is very important, that Greenland actually would rather have the defenses of the United States strategically again, between Russia and China, that it actually makes a ton of sense. And the more I've looked into this, initially I thought this was just another one of these Canada kind of jokes about becoming a state. There is a real strategic advantage to striking an alliance. And so whether or not we take it is very different than whether or not we come to some kind of strategic alliance with them, which I think is actually very possible.
Greenland is like Guam, and it's like Okinawa. It's just a unique piece of real estate that has strategic for air and sea potentially. What do we have at that base? I'm sure we have planes. What do we have at the base in Greenland? Do we have any ships or subs?
I don't believe so.
All right, and how long has that base been there? How did we get a base on Greenland, Sean?
I don't actually. The funny part about it is I've been to Guam multiple times.
Yeah, but how did we get the base on Greenland, Dan? Do you know
I don't know.
How did we get that base on Greenland, Dan?
I don't know. I wonder if it's a World War II, era thing as a stopping point. I mean, to Sean's point, the best thing I've read is as more ice melts and the waterways to the north open up, where there are mineral deposits and the strategic nature of cutting through up there if there's a problem in Asia or whatnot. The one problem with all this is Denmark doesn't seem to want to give it up. So, and I have not seen Denmark.
I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, anything that says we're looking for an alliance, but who knows?
All right. By the way, this is interesting. I'm Wikipediaing as we go. Yeah. It used to be Thule Air Force Base. It's now a U.S. Space Force base located in the northwest of Greenland.
It's only Space Force?
Well, it was Air Force, and it was transferred to the space, which technically is it's kind of like, don't get upset with me, Marine Corps folks, but it's like the Marine Corps part of the Department of the Navy.
Does the Air Force or the Space Force have ships?
No.
None. Not even support ships?
The Army does. I don't think the Air Force does.
Well, you don't know anything about what the Space Force does. You just think they have lasers like on a Warner Brothers cartoon. I think now that this might happen. I may be completely nuts, but my guess is, and I don't know if anybody's polled it, but I hope somebody does. If there's any pollsters on here, please throw it on your next survey. I bet you this tests very well. The notion of the U.S.
Hold on. I'm going to answer your question.
Yeah, please
To assist with port operations, it is home to the only tugboat in the Department of the Air Force. In the summertime, a 70-foot one tugboat escorts fuel tankers and cargo ships and aligns them with the pier and moves iceberg out of the way. The tugboat is also used for sightseeing tours in surrounding bays.
I would love a poll of the American public opinion about what's that called? Divine. What's it called? American expansionism? Whatever.
Oh, Manifest Destiny?
Manifest Destiny. I bet Americans would love this. It's my hunch. And I would love a poll of the people in Greenland because, no offense to Denmark, would they rather be part, not just for security, but culturally, in terms of tourism? We'll see. I bet Don Jr. sends back some great stuff. That's my
So maybe DC gets 2 senators and Greenland gets 2 senators.
DC should never, ever have 2 senators.
They become a protectorate or something.
Like Puerto Rico.
Like
but I, in all seriousness, I think that by the end of Trump's first term, there is some sort of strategic alliance or greater military enhancement, and whether Guam's the right or American Samoa, because they're all a little different in terms of the relationship. But I wouldn't be surprised if it is somewhat of a protectorate.
Yeah. All right. Again, raise your hand if you want in on the conversation. All right. Donald Trump is meeting tomorrow with Republican senators. He's in town for the Carter funeral on Thursday. And then he's having a series of meetings at Mar-a-Lago with various categories of House Republicans. So there's a substantive aspect to this, but there's also just the kind of interpersonal. It is common to say that they're beholden to Trump because they don't want to be primaried, et cetera. But Dan, how important are these meetings and just in terms of the personal connection that Donald Trump needs to forge with these people to get them to march in lockstep, which in both chambers they really need to do to get his agenda passed?
It's huge. Members want to feel like they're heard. They want to be respected. They want to know that you've taken into consideration their concerns, that you're trying to address them. If I'm Susie Wiles and she's been very active in Tallahassee in the past and places like that, you want to hold those hands. You want to bring them on board because at some point you're going to have to say, enough, we've got to do this. You're not going to get everything you want. I need you to cast this vote. And so all this spade work from now till then should make that easier. I think the question is if Trump goes in and just says, everything is fine, it's going to be beautiful, don't worry, then it's kind of a pointless thing. But if he sits and he listens and he takes the 2 sides' concerns in, it's good.
Sean.
Yeah, I think that Dan's point cannot be underscored. The idea enough that these personal relationships go a long way when a tough vote comes along. And so Trump, and one of the biggest misconceptions there is of Trump is that he doesn't listen. He's phenomenal at listening, to be honest with you. I think a lot of times people try to take a conversation and pit it, because 2 sides were in the room. But if he does exactly that, sit back and say, here's what I want to do, tell me your thoughts, and really starts to cultivate the sense of you're part of the process, this is going to go a long way to passing those 1 or 2 reconciliation bills, whatever it ends up being, and will play dividends. I will tell you this. I think the smart move, especially considering the size of the House majority, would be for whatever his legislative affairs team is, ultimately to get a group of those Democrats sitting in Trump-esque districts, maybe even a Dem 1, Dem 2, Dem 3 plus district, and start to cultivate relationships with them, because God forbid you lose the midterm. You want to have 4 or 5 people that you've developed a relationship with that's not Johnny come lately come January 6th, 7th of 2023.
Sean, is Donald Trump...
I'm sorry, God. Sorry.
Yeah.
Still not used to 2027.
Next cycle. Is Trump the kind of guy, kind of president, who knows how many kids Chip Roy has and what their names are?
It's a great question. In some cases, yes. I've been very shocked by the level of detail that, I mean, his level of recall is honest to God, like no one I've ever seen before. And it's not just the personal details. He'll recall a conversation from, 4 years ago and say, remember that first time you came into my office and da-da-da-da. I'm like, oh my God, I can't remember you remember that. So it depends on the person.
You need to spend some time with Bill Clinton before you say Trump's the best ever.
No, you're probably right. And
Bill Clinton will 10 years later say, whatever happened to your son's, softball game? Like he's encyclopedic. Sorry, keep going.
Well, but
I want to make one
question,
point.
The point to or the answer to your question is, I think it depends. Some of these members, he has an unbelievable degree of recall. Some of them who haven't spent the time with them, less so. So he doesn't do the legwork of maybe researching somebody before they come in, but once he meets them and interacts with them, that interaction sticks with them.
All right, I'm going to give you some free insight into Donald Trump. He knows all about casting, right? He's the best television producer ever elected president. He also knows about place and venue, okay? And one of the advantages he has, he's got his own impressive plane. He's got Trump Tower, and he has Mar-a-Lago. And having those members down to Mar-a-Lago is something other presidents, Joe Biden's not going to have them all over to his house in Delaware to Rehoboth. It's a huge advantage. It's like Xanadu, right? It's like a mythical setting. If you've ever been to Mar-a-Lago, it's a beautiful place. It's not the kind of place owned by members of Congress or other presidents, and that gives them a big advantage because they can come there, they can have the meatloaf, they can be part of something they've seen and heard about. It's a big advantage. All right.
Well, Mark, one last point on that. It's also a unique. You can't just go. It's not like Disney where you can go buy a ticket and go.
Unless you're a Chinese spy.
When they go down, it's a point of coming back and saying to everybody, "Guess where I was this weekend?"
Yeah,
Guess
exactly,
what I did.
exactly. It's like flying on the plane. Now, if you're president, you have the Oval Office and you have Air Force One. But this is another advantage that Trump used when he's not been in the White House, and even frankly when he is. I mean, Mar-a-Lago is in some ways more impressive than the rundown West Wing. Dan.
One other thing, though, when I used to take Democrats to him to raise money, he's very good at trying to find a connection point with you, whether it's sports or business or like he will probe and try to find something that he can kind of relate to you with or not relate, but talk to you about. To Sean's point, he is good at that, charming you in a meeting.
Yep. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you won't see this anywhere else. 201, please.
Ha ha ha. Iceland. Greenland, sorry.
That's all right. Often confused. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. We come in peace. That's Don Jr. It's been reported that Charlie Kirk is with him. I bet there's some great cinematographers. So
does Don Jr. always get Dad's plane? Is that?
No, I was going to say no.
For a trip like that, it's unusual. It's unusual.
Yeah, but this goes back to the point you were just making. There's a reason they didn't just send him over there in some chartered plane. They wanted the Trump plane to land in Greenland.
Correct. This is all happening, folks. Get out your kayak app and start booking your flights now, because this is going to become a summer paradise. Forget Maine. Forget Martha's Vineyard. We're all going to Greenland. All right. Mark.
But can I reflect on one thing that I think between Greenland and Trudeau yesterday, this is unreal. I mean, like, we are talking about a president of the United States not in office right now who is having a profound impact on world events, the likes of which I don't think we've ever seen. Justin Trudeau resigned yesterday because Trump belittled him, right? And you have the folks in Greenland having to take a real discussion about whether or not we're going to annex or strategically align with them or whatever you want to call it, because Trump sort of threw it out there in his Truth Social tweet. The power of this president cannot be overstated enough.
Yeah, well, and what's happening in Europe with Elon Musk kind of smacking around, right. The same thing.
All right, guys, I just sent you a great picture of Donald Trump Jr. Tell me, just throw that up when that's ready. He's arrived in a place called Nuuk, N-U-N-E-U-K, UUK. Great photo. Posted by James Blair, one of the incoming White House Deputy Chiefs of Staff. I don't know if he's on the
Doesn't
trip
look
or
like
not,
he's in a suit and tie. That's
No, he's not. He's not in a suit and tie. All right, let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg. This morning, the head of Meta announced that the platform was eliminating fact-checking in favor of, quote, community notes, part of a lot of these online platforms shifting away from saying they're going to police information. Now, we're all going to have a million points of view about why he's doing this. But first, this is not Jesse Eisenberg. This is Mark Zuckerberg in a video released a few hours ago talking about the change in policy. Please roll the video.
So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms. Third, we're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms. We used to have filters that scanned for any policy violation. Now we're going to focus those filters on tackling illegal and high severity violations. And for lower severity violations, we're going to rely on someone reporting an issue before we take action.
Oh, so much to say about that. Now, there's a million things to say, not just about Meta, but about tech and about all these companies that are changing their DEI policies. You know, I always go back to Michael Jordan when asked why he didn't endorse Democrats for president, said Republicans buy sneakers too. Republicans use the Meta platform too. But here's one thing that I think is undercovered. And if you're a reporter out there, feel free to write this story or take a fair amount of reporting. You've got some people from Silicon Valley at the table, right? Elon is at the table. Some of Elon's posse at the table. These folks, they got to be talking to their revenue people and maybe their counsel and saying, we got to get at the table. Like, stuff's going to happen. There may be regulation from the Vance wing of the party, but there also may be, explosion of access to things from the government, from the Pentagon, contracts, et cetera. We got to get at the table. And the table stakes for being at the table, you got to give $1 million to the inauguration. You might need to give some money to the Trump library, but you also have to do something like this. So my view is this is happening for a million reasons, but this is the big one. Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Federal Trade Commission's been looking at Meta now for a little bit. They've been looking at Amazon, right? You want the gun pointed at somebody else, not you. And look, in fairness to Meta, if you just look at the last 4 years, like the Hunter Biden laptop, some of the COVID stuff, where at the time people thought they were conspiracy theories, misinformation, like Russian sabotage, and then it turned out it wasn't the case. And I think anytime that you're trying to police free speech, it gets very dangerous. And so Meta is now getting, on the right side of this. A hat tip to Joel Kaplan, who just took over, who's been a longtime advocate internally on this front. And so I think, it's hard to say that you should still have a bunch of, people sitting around Silicon Valley determining what should and should not be said on its platform.
As Sean speaks about Meta, we've just thrown up James Blair's pictures of Don Jr. And there you can see, make Greenland great again. Sean.
So first, I would just say, welcome to the party, Mark. I'm glad that this free speech, not Mark, Mark Zuckerberg.
Mark Zuckerberg, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. The same guy who did Zuckerbucks.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad that he finally got on the bandwagon. I mean, you can't talk about free speech and then censor it all. I am a believer in welcoming the things that I hate. That's the beauty of the First Amendment, is welcoming all voices. And this idea of censorship and fact checking. Fact checking was code on the left for silencing people on the right. That's how they got around it. Like, you got to be willing to deal with some language that you find uncomfortable, that you might even detest, if you want to support the First Amendment and the freedom of speech. So I welcome him coming late to the party. I don't think it's genuine, but I don't know that I care. If this is what gets him here, I'm fine with it. To your point, I think that's absolutely right. These are business decisions they're making. They are realizing that they have 4 years of Trump. The American people voted in large swath. This is not 2016, where there's a bunch of excuses why he's not legitimate and that they can be part of the resistance. They have 4 years where they have to worry about their bottom line, and so I'm excited for the next 4 years in terms of this. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a transactional relationship right now. This is about how do I make sure that the Trump team doesn't come after me or that I'm in their good graces. And that the more that they can do very publicly, whether it's through donations or videos like Zuckerberg just did, to show President Trump that I'm on the team, the better.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, don't forget when Barack Obama got elected and companies put a huge premium on what was an attempt to shift to clean energy. Apple left the U.S. Chamber of Commerce over this issue. Like there were a bunch of companies scrambling to kind of go to the Obama altar, to the progressive altar on clean energy. It came apart pretty quickly, but it is common business. You know, all politicians are members of the, I'm sorry, all businesses are members of the incumbent party. So they rush to make amends.
So there has been bipartisan interest in regulating big tech, particularly in areas of consumer privacy, protecting kids. And the big tech lobbyists are geniuses at pretending they want to be regulated and then just killing it all. I mean, they're geniuses. If lobbyists should be paid based on how effective they are, they're the most underpaid lobbyists in Washington because they've been 100% effective in warding off any regulation. This is something, again, left, populist right. J.D. Vance and others in the party, senator from Missouri.
Josh Hawley.
Josh Hawley. There's lots of Republicans who say the federal government should regulate one of the most powerful and important and lucrative American industries, Silicon Valley, big tech, particularly the social media platforms. Will the Trump administration, Sean, move in that direction, or will they simply defer to the free market, as I predict they will, by the way?
So it's interesting, without giving it away, I did have some conversations of this over the last few days, and one of the interesting effects of the Chevron decision that came out of the Supreme Court was it basically said agencies like the FCC, the Federal Communications Agency, can't just legislate without an act of Congress. And I think that that's going to make movement on things like Section 230 a little bit more complicated because it's going to push it back to Congress. That said, I think you will see some attempts to do this. Remember, there's a difference between regulating, like right now, big tech has a lot of protections. You can't sue Facebook for a lot of the things that happen on there. They're not treated the same way that even a newspaper is treated. So I think part of this is actually taking away the protections that they have as opposed to regulating them. But I do think that the movement isn't going to die. There's a lot of discussion about how to achieve this.
One of the things about the Zuckerberg video I find so impressive, and again, I'm sure he played some role in it, but kudos to the lobbyists. There's so much code language in there for the right. He doesn't explicitly say, I'm doing this for the right, but there's so many buzzwords in there.
Mark, it's not just the language. The dude, I will hat tip steal this from Dan Turrentine. He looks like a crypto bro. I mean, the dude, seriously, I get I mean, he's not even wearing a hoodie. It's like, I had to watch that video and wonder if it was the dude from, oh my God.
It's Jesse Eisenberg. It's Jesse Eisenberg. Yeah.
I mean, seriously,
awesome. It's awesome.
It was unbelievable.
The whole thing is awesome. My friend Ed Rogers, who's experienced Washington hand, has an expression that if you're someone like Mark Zuckerberg, if you're a business leader, Washington presents a challenge. You don't want to be so far away that you're not in the fire to stay warm, but you don't want to be so close to the fire that you get burned. And that dude is a guy who wants to be close to the fire right now, and he's not worried about being burned. And I can't wait to see what his woke employees think about this.
Well, look, Dan, by the way, Dan mentioned it, but they elevated Joel Kaplan, who was the head of the DC, he was a former deputy chief of staff during the Bush administration. And he ran the DC operations. When Nick Clegg stepped down, they promoted him to global head of who knows what the title is now. Yeah. But the bottom line is
of everything. You think Nick
Joel
Clegg
has been a
voluntarily
long-time advocate of free speech, and so they've got real good cred now in DC, and they've made some other hires, pulled in somebody who to head strategic communications. That
you think Nick Clegg wants to spend more time with his family, or you think he was forced out because he's too left for Trump?
I don't, that's a good question. I wonder if it was a combination of you're going to have to spend more time here. You have to do this. I don't think he wanted, I'm sure that he's got plenty of money.
Yeah.
Um,
All right, last
don't
question,
know.
last topic, and then we're going to get to your question. So please raise your hand if you want to be in the conversation. Every day, Joe Biden's doing stuff that is meant to burnish his legacy, or not. I mean, I don't know, clearing out Guantanamo. I don't get why they're so hard to do that. So impassioned to do that here at the end. But there's continues to be a drumbeat of rumors about more pardons, etc. Dan, how would you summarize what's going on with the final days of Joe Biden?
It's the same as his 4 years, which is there's very little public communication. There's very little table setting. And so all of this keeps coming as a surprise. Why did you do 1,400 pardons? Like, other than the press release, he hasn't sat down, or his team hasn't really sat down and explained kind of what he was thinking and how he got there. And so even on these executive orders, while, Democrats can sit there and think, okay, yeah, oil drilling off the coast, like, I get it. It's just like one surprise after the other. And I think just as in the last 4 years, he is not out in the public. He is not explaining this. And therefore, everyone shoots at it. And, it just kind of flaps in the wind.
Yeah. The word everyone's looking for
You go. Go ahead.
is sloppy. This goes back to the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, they passed something and then they wonder why they didn't know how to sell this. And to Dan's point, over and over again, they do a one-off. There's barely a press release to explain it, leaving everyone to wonder what's going on. I think this is literally just throwing everything but the kitchen sink out over the last few days. There's no explanation for it. There's no lead up to it. They're not even telling you where he's going and trying to do this. They announced that he's giving 2 speeches. What were the speeches about? Why did he want to do them? There was no follow-up. And I literally think this is like, hey, here's what else is on the checklist. Let's just get it done.
All right, 2 more things about Greenland, and then we're going to your questions. First of all, Paul Wilkie, our great producer, one of our great producers, points out when Ron Howard was being written out of Happy Days, or leaving Happy Days, they wrote Richie Cunningham out by having him serve a brief tour in the Army where he was stationed in Greenland. And a very, very well plugged in viewer of this program, communicating live in real time, points out something I don't believe we raised about Greenland, but I meant to say, which is it's not just about strategic location. There are also a little thing there called minerals.
I said it. I mentioned that.
You did say it. All right.
Yep.
So we're going to continue to follow Greenland because unlike most of the media, which is treating this as a joke, we are prepared to make Greenland part of the American community.
Make Greenland great again.
Yes. All right. Let's bring folks in. Again, tell us where you are, what's on your mind. Michelle.
Mark, just before you do that, I need to just several people yesterday.
Oh, yes, I apologize. I apologize for not giving you a chance to apologize. Dan, the floor is yours to do something for which you've already been lauded by Hugh Hewitt.
Well, I'm very grateful for all of the people who watch this show. And when we make a mistake, point it out on X and in the chat. Yesterday, when we were talking about January 6th, I mentioned that police officers were injured, some of whom then went on to die as a result. That is not true.
That's not true.
Yep, several people pointed that out. I actually did not know that, so I looked it up and was somewhat surprised myself. But in fairness to everyone, that is not true. My larger point that people should be held accountable for injuring people and property, I stand by. But thank you all for pointing out my mistake. And I apologize to everyone.
Very good. Very good. Yeah.
All right. Michelle, welcome in. Happy New Year.
I teed it up for you, Michelle.
Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind, please.
I'm in Rochester, New York, upstate New York. And Dan, I appreciate your saying that because I was one who said no, unless I missed it. So it was not a pleasant day, but it is a good thing. My observation, you talk about, forgive the background music, somebody's getting a phone call and not picking it up. When I hear the news now, Dan, and I point this to you, one of the reasons why Americans, I think, voted so overwhelmingly is they feel left out of the process. What I mean by that is I hear now where there's consternation about Democrats okaying Donald Trump's appointees, but I don't hear a good reason why. I just hear that they want to throw a wrench into the monkey works. And that makes people feel like they're not a part of the process. And and when I watch and when I listen and I hear we're going to not allow the illegals to be deported, when whether true or real, the perception is illegals are causing a lot of crime. Why then, when you want to assist in getting at least some of the illegals? So you talk about messaging. The messaging seems that nobody's listening to the fact that Donald Trump won in a mandate. And what they want to do now, and this is maybe just a perception, so that's why I'm saying to you, how do you feel that they could communicate better why they're making these decisions to stymie the new regime?
Great set of questions. So one, I think not all Democrats on the example that you gave are trying to put a stick in the wheel. The mayor of New York City has met with the Trump administration. I believe it was the mayor of Los Angeles or somebody also met with the Trump administration. The internet will correct me if I have that wrong, but the point is some Democrats are on board. Look, I think you will see Democrats agree on some issues, but don't forget, Democrats, their nominee got whatever it was, 48.5% of the vote, right, to Trump's 49.9 or something of that nature. Right? It's about 1.5% difference.
Well, actually, to correct you on that point, she got what she got because everybody hated Donald Trump more than that they believed in Kamala Harris. It had to do with not liking the candidate across the aisle.
Sure, and some people voted for Trump because they didn't like Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. But my point is, the Democrats will stand by their principles and stand by their beliefs, which are evolving and in my opinion need to evolve, where they, in some instances, just as Trump and Republicans for the last 4 years tried to put some sticks in the wheel of Democratic legislating, right? And so in that regard, I think it's American and the Democratic Party should. If I'm going to say, for instance, J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, says absolutely not, are we going to help with illegal immigrants? He, I think, is going to run for a third term, might be voted out of office. Let the people of Illinois decide if they support that or they don't. But I think the Democratic Party should not lay down just because Trump won. They shouldn't.
I don't know that they should lay down. What I mean by messaging is give us a reason why you're making these decisions. As you say now, Joe Biden has, when I saw the Medal of Freedom, the list, I'm like, I should be on that list. I mean, really? Who was it? Yeah. George Soros? He is single-handedly one of the reasons why we're in the shape we're in. His money backing candidates that really undermined the rule of law in this country. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have an agenda. I'm saying it might behoove the Democrats to tell people why they have that agenda.
Sean.
I'm going to let Michelle speak for me.
Okay. Michelle, thank you. Do you have any New Year's resolutions you want to share with us?
I don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I resolve every day to make a difference
Yeah.
somewhere, somehow. I don't do resolutions,
That's
but I
good.
hope everybody who did accomplishes them. I give them all the prayers in the world, because generally by February, that ship has sailed is one of my favorite sayings.
Thank you, Michelle. We all resolve every day to follow your example. Thank you.
Yeah.
Grateful whenever you join. Happy to have you back here with us. Thank you. All right. Let's go from Michelle, Michael Graham of New Hampshire. Mr. Graham, welcome in. Thank you for joining. What's on your mind, sir?
Happy New Year. Thanks so much. First, thanks for sharing Dan with us at Inside Sources. He wrote a great piece about the future of the Democratic Party, and it got great pickup with our newspaper partners across the country. Great job. A quick question. So on Twitter, I happened to post or link a picture of Nancy Pelosi being sworn in. It showed like a video clip or something. And the age issue just jumped out at me. And I'm curious from the three of you. It's kind of interesting to look at Team Trump in the nominees for the cabinet. I'm not going to call it a youth movement necessarily, but it's a lot of people who don't have to dye their hair. And I wonder if having Nancy Pelosi's in the House for another 2 years, have her being in the center of politics, having the other older folks in New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen turns 78 later this month. She's almost certain to run for another term. That'll make her 85 if she's elected. Do you think that the candidates for Congress, Senate, maybe even governor across the country in 2026 are going to face the age issue in a new way because of the combination of what happened to Biden, plus the fact that you look at the leadership in the Senate and it's in Congress, et cetera, it still looks pretty darn old.
Yeah. Even John Thune's looking old to me.
Yeah, exactly. I was noticing that.
Sean, what do you think?
I think Michael's touching on a great subject. And the question is whether it manifests itself. We saw the story of Congresswoman Kay Granger out of Fort Worth,
Exactly.
Which it's a bipartisan issue. So it's just a question of, look, getting back to the issue of free speech, I will just say, and obviously, Michael is a live free or die kind of person up there in New Hampshire. I believe strongly in allowing voters to make a choice. And if you're dumb enough to let somebody who doesn't look like they have their faculties together get back in office, that's on the voters. They have a choice. Sometimes they choose. As a fellow New Englander, I know sometimes we let our members stay in too long because they get seniority and the small states want to have it. But at the same time, there is a question, and I'm hoping that this is where primaries, which I think have been somewhat effective, have come in a little bit more to address these issues. And hopefully a lot of these senior folks know when it's time to step aside or face a primary. But I would say this just in a last point, and I said this during the campaign so that I could be consistent on this. I don't think a number, I know some people that are in their 80s that are sharp as a tack, and I know some people in their 60s that have lost it. So I don't think that the number matters. It's on a case-by-case individual basis. But the million-dollar question is, do members, and the problem is for some of these folks, if you're a United States Senator in particular, you get to go to Walter Reed, you've got a staff that takes care of you, that picks you up every morning, that answers your phone. I remember in the case of the Bush administration, there was a very senior administration official that had been in office so long that, honest to God, they called some former aides the day that they had left office and said, and they were living in Alexandria. They didn't know how to get to the airport. They were like, I don't know what to do. And in all honesty, and that's where I think the problem is for some of these folks, it's a reality. They don't know how to live without a swath of aides, right. A cadre of folks that does everything for them, that drives them to Walter Reed to get their medicine, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think voters need to hold people like that on both sides of the aisle accountable if they're past their prime.
So I just want to jump in and defend New England because I'm from South Carolina. In fact, in my Republican consultant days, I'm the only person to run a primary against Strom Thurmond and live to tell the tale. And so I just want to point that out, that it's not just New England.
Oh, no. But what I'm saying is, with respect to New England, is having grown up there, we allow some of our people to stay in office because they get a committee chairmanship or get into leadership, and the state gets a disproportionate amount of attention or funds that as a smaller state you might not get. So this isn't an attack, it's just a reality that when you're a smaller state with one or two members of Congress, that sometimes you see the advantages in a way that a bigger state might not. So Texas and Florida, California, New York, Illinois, they're going to have a crop of folks that take care of the state regardless. Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. I mean, you have a much smaller congressional delegation.
Look, I think it's one of the reasons Joe Biden thought he could run for re-election was I think, he looked at Strom Thurmond, Robert Byrd, like if you have a team around you, like you can do this. You can kind of age in office. And even though you may be slowing down, like you can still put points on the board and be successful, he thought, even though you're diminishing because the kind of machinery around you can grind it out. And of course, that machinery becomes in love with the fact that they think they are essentially the senator or the congressperson. Look, I think it's a huge issue for Democrats. I mean, I think you look around, Steny Hoyer's still up there. Nancy's still up there. Jim Clyburn is still up there. I think Pelosi believes that only she can stop Trump. I think she doesn't really fully have confidence in Hakeem. I think that the caucus looks to her behind the scenes to guide all of this. I think Schumer thinks no one can do what Chuck Schumer can do. And so anytime you start thinking you're indispensable, it's usually time to kind of move on.
There's two other points that are worth making. Number one, to piggyback off what you're saying, Dan, they also know that once they leave, no one's going to answer. I mean, like
that's exactly right.
You immediately diminish. And then secondly, one of the things that at least three of us who've been on the staff side of things know, and on the consultant side, is that once your person steps down, the money train stops. You have to go out and get a new job. And so there's staff and consultants around you that keep telling you and urging you to keep going.
I think Jeanne Shaheen runs again, in part because of what you just said, and how do you give that up, even though there's some age issues, et cetera. The other thing is she just became the ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, first woman to do it, and she finally has some power. And there's a lot of talk, oh, she'll get out because Republicans have a majority. It's very unlikely the Democrats flip the Senate. Why would she stay? I think she stays.
Look, I also think I'll just say, one of the errors we made is it was hard to go after Donald Trump's age when you look at the group that we have leading us. And I think when you think about the future, if it's JD Vance, who's going to be whatever he'd be, 42, 43, we got to have younger people and new voices. That's why I thought AOC was a good idea, even though I don't agree with her politics. Like, we need to move on.
Hegseth may be crazy, but he's a young, good-looking guy on TV. What's her name with the streaky hair? X-Men lady. She looks she's young and good look. Yeah, I mean, they're going to have a lot of people who are on TV regularly who are young, and then the Democrats are going to wheel out Nancy Pelosi with their robotic animatronic Disney works going, you must stop them, and it's going to have an impact. Michael, are there any young Democrats who are legit stars who could be governor or senator in the future? In New Hampshire? In New Hampshire? There's very little bench on either side. It is the thing I've learned since I moved up here, having done politics. It's a super small state, so you have a small bench. Also, there aren't a lot of things to run for. There's only one statewide elected official at the state level, the governor. There's no one at the AG. No one else is elected. So
I will just as a small note, you have an incoming White House press secretary that happens to be from New Hampshire.
And I also want to say, watching Caroline Leavitt run for Congress 2 years ago really kind of reopened my eyes. Whether she was a great candidate or not, and you can argue about positions, whatever, good fit for New Hampshire. She's pretty far to the right. Just the fact that she was young and dynamic and it just, people wanted to help her. And then once again, you got these candidates who wheel out, who are in power. I think age is going to be this thing that is always going on. And I wonder how many Senate races and congressional races across the country we're not even thinking about are going to have an impact. I will tell you, if it's Scott Brown versus Jeanne Shaheen, I don't know. I mean, he's not a spring chicken, but if it's somebody else, I don't, I just think it's something to watch. I also think
how it's done matters, right? You can't just go after somebody's age for the sake of it. You've got to show that they've lost a step and that they're not doing their job.
But I think I think it's moved up from a thing you barely noticed to now I think it's on voters' minds. The Biden thing really broke it through. And now, like I said, I just saw Nancy Pelosi yesterday and I just went, wow, is that really where we are? How many voters are still there? Michael, thank you. Great topic. Appreciate it. Happy New Year. Come back regularly. Sean, just to piggyback of the invocation of the new press secretary, is she, as CBS reported, not going to have the press secretary's office?
I have not heard any pushback that that's not true. Yeah. I will tell you that just as a side note to Taylor Budowich, who apparently will have it, there is a fireplace in there. If you want to light it, please call the staff. Do not try to do it on your own. I'll explain.
Pulling down that flue is not easy.
It's not just the flu. There's some other issues that may or may not cause you to fog up the entire West Wing if you do it wrong.
All right. The service comes rushing in. Tom, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Happy New Year. Tell folks who don't know where you are.
where you are, what's on your mind after you unmute. There you go.
Yeah, happy New Year to you too. I'm in British Virgin Islands, and I'm getting intermittent coverage. So I missed it.
So far, so good.
First off, yeah, okay. So I missed, Dan, your statement about I thought it was the deaths on January 6th, and I just have a simple question: where did that come from? Why did you say that, and where did you get that information?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I don't know where it got in my head that police officers died. I honestly don't, which is why, to be honest, I got off the air yesterday. I looked at my phone at all these people saying you're wrong, and I went to Google. I thought they were wrong.
Can I help you on this as a guy who's stepped in it multiple times? If you watch CNN or read the Washington Post, you would think you were right. I think that they falsely reported this for the longest time.
And they often write it in a clever way.
I think they now do that. But
yes,
initially,
they now do that. But I'm saying it's the way, and you're right. Initially, they wrote it wrong, but the way they write it now is a way intended, I think, to appear as if the facts are as they originally reported.
But to Dan's defense, if you read the CNNs or the Washington Post, the New York Times, or Politico for the first couple of years, Dan came away with the right thing because they falsely spread that lie. And now that Mark's right, they weasel word this where they say, like, in the days preceding it, several officers passed away because of suicide or what have you. The only death that day was Ashley Babbitt. And it's a shame how they cover that as well, but that's another story. But to Dan's defense, if you read the legacy media outlets, the way they covered it, there's a lot of Americans that were falsely given the impression that was the case. So Dan, I think he handled this very well. I have experience in stepping in things, so I can say that he deserves an A for how he handled this.
I was wrong. I did not know that. Now, I will say, 17 officers were severely injured, and we can talk about that another day. To me, that's a problem and shouldn't be glossed over, but I don't know where I got it from.
Tom, did you have a follow-up on that or something else?
I don't have a follow-up on that. I do want to say that if Michelle Hardaway is still on, what a breath of fresh air. Thanks for her comments.
Well, let's bring Michelle back. There's no reason to treat it like she's not here. Michelle, feel free to graciously thank Tom.
Well, I do. And I do, Dan. One of the reasons why I continue to listen is that you're willing to admit that things are different. But what I will say, and you probably figured out, I lean right. I noticed that untruths are dropped into a conversation, and then there's a retraction. There's a young lady on the 5 who tends to do that. And she says what she says with a lot of conviction. And a lot of times it's an error. And will say the next day, I was wrong or whatever. The problem is you've dropped that hand grenade into a conversation. And while most people will hear the retraction, and I'm not saying you did that intentionally, you really felt that was a fact. But I recognize that people throw untruths out there and then say, yeah, I was wrong on that fact. But how many people have carried that now in their bank of knowledge? And that's one of the things that distresses me. And again, I'm not going to say it's on the right or the left. I just say that happens. And sometimes I think it's strategic.
Michelle, thank you. Thank you.
I would say the issue we're discussing has a lot of the topic of the date of yesterday has a lot of false statements associated with it from both sides, right?
Yeah, I said that.
That people have run with. And so, look, it is a problem. It is a problem with being on live, video here, that sometimes you do just get it wrong. And I am not, too big to admit when I screw up or if I'm wrong. And And I do read your comments, by the way, for all you people who post them. And it's not the first time I've said I've made a mistake, and I'll keep doing it. Hopefully I don't make many, but
yeah. Let me just say, part of my job is to try to correct mistakes. Sometimes I don't know that they're errors. I wasn't listening when Dan said the thing he said because I'm doing other stuff during the show to try to keep things moving, including teeing up a few more elements from Greenland that we'll have before the end of the program that will delight you. But one of the things about two-way, it's not just like Dan kind of being idiosyncratic. We're here to be a different kind of media and to acknowledge when there are errors and nuances and to not get our backs up about things. If we were wrong, we will always say it. And as Dan said, we're pretty keen on monitoring when people are there to correct us. In this case, Dan had the pleasure of being corrected by many people, so it was impossible to miss that he'd made the error. But we're trying to not just be an attractive form of media by being willing to acknowledge errors and nuance and changes in things, but also to hopefully set an example for others. Tom and Michelle, thank you both for joining. We'd love to have you both, so please come back. Guys, are those two elements ready?
Yes, they are.
You sure?
All right. So put up the picture. This is another picture of Don Jr. And Sean Spicer will engage in some Kremlinology. It's fantastic. Donald Trump is now referring to this group of people as his reps. So he says, Don Jr. and my reps landing in Greenland. The reception has been great. They in the free world need blah, blah, blah. I don't have the whole thing here. Oh, they in the free world need safety, security, strength, and peace. This is a deal that must happen. MAGA, make Greenland great again. So, Sean, that's Don Jr. and Charlie Kirk and the White House political director, basically, James Blair. Who are the other two guys, Sean?
So from the right to left, that's James Blair, as you mentioned, Deputy White House Chief of Staff, incoming former political director, Charlie Kirk, Don in the tan coat, Sergio Gore, and next to him, who is the incoming White House
and a very close friend of Don and a publisher, book publisher.
And then I'm trying to make out who the one next to Sergio is.
Yeah.
By the way, they all have Trump Force One jackets on that look pretty good.
They're nice. Let's see if we can find an internet site to buy those. But that is a hardy group up there in Nuuk. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. As I say, we'll continue to cover this because it's really compelling, and I'm being bombarded with messages from folks saying, take this seriously. This is not.
Boy, I will say, Mark, if this is serious, I'll be curious what the Russians say. I can't imagine this would just go, sure, here it is. Like,
yeah,
people have equities.
I wonder, almost everybody in Greenland lives in urban areas. It's a lot of uninhabited land. You could
by the way,
good stuff there.
The statement from the Prime Minister of Denmark just issued a statement, and this is what I think is interesting about the statement. She says, Greenland belongs to Greenlanders, not to Denmark, to Greenlanders. Yeah. And I think that's fascinating because that puts us back to the beginning of the conversation that we had about, hey, if Greenland says we would rather strategically align with the United States than Denmark, that's going to be fascinating. And if I were the Prime Minister of Denmark, I'd be a little bit more assertive about it's mine, it's ours, it's not yours.
Yeah. English is not one of the official languages there, although I'm sure there's lots of English spoken. I wonder what the cultural influence of the United States is like there. Like, how many times a day can you watch Friends on Greenland TV? That's really the question.
If they have Starlink, they can see it all.
They could see it all. All right. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for the questions. As always, we love when new people raise their hands, so please feel free to participate. Tonight, Two-Way Tonight is on at its regular time, back at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, where it belongs. Talk about Manifest Destiny. Two-Way Tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll have some great conversations, some great guests, and we'll have full coverage. When I say full coverage, I mean full coverage of the Trump press conference. We're going to break that thing down like John Madden on a 4th and 1. And then tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, right back here, this program with continuing nonstop coverage of Greenland and everything else. Two-Way's The Morning Meeting will be here with you 9 a.m. tomorrow. Gentlemen, enjoy your day, and I'll see you at the press conference. Have a good day.
11 a.m. Bye-bye.